you have to push the actor to embark on that journey. You can't just say, hey, you're the character, but then you're not doing the character's moves. You can't just come up for a close-up and give one eye wink and say you're the character. No, you must learn your physical lines the same way we all do. And it's imperative that you do that in playing this character if you want to be an action star.
This is an interview with Clayton Barber. Clayton is a director who got his start as a stuntman and stunt coordinator and is known for films like Blade, Black Panther, and the Creed series. He also produced the Rope-a-Dope series and directed Blindsided, and he's my mentor. We talk about American stunts, his work with Hong Kong directors, and of course, boxing.
Yeah, what were you watching as a kid? What influenced you culturally growing up?
Well, I was watching anything and everything that was on 3 channels at that time, which was very little. So they were very traditional films about life, American life, like Westerns, holiday movies, things like that, growing up as a kid. It wasn't until the 70s and the 80s that we got into the cheese in hand that we all love, and to exploiting the next degree of that. But still growing up, you find the undiscovered gems on the Saturday matinees, like kung fu movies, that were basically, Asian Westerns as well. But, instead of using horses and guns, they used blades and kung fu, and it was really cool. So that had a big influence on me, growing up, discovering that. And I believe that every kid from my generation that did discover those movies, it really influenced our lives and opened up ourselves to, a new discovery of new language and, of different ways to express what we were doing. So yeah, it was, that's it in a nutshell. I loved every sort of action film that you could have and any cheesy film and things like that, because, they didn't take themselves seriously. They just had fun with it. And that's what I was really equipped with.
When you were watching Westerns as a kid too, some of those stunts are some of the best stunts in history. Is there a big gap? Was there a big gap in your mind when you were watching the Western films versus the Hong Kong films? And how did you perceive those differences?
To me, it was only the flavor, the environment, the dress, the language. But other than that, the human story was always the same, I was able to just okay, I can watch a Japanese movie and I can feel the same thing when I'm watching a Western. It's the exact same thing. It's just different clothes, different language, and, things like that. So that didn't bother me because that's all we had, to look at. We didn't have anybody telling us that it was supposed to be different. It was just like, okay, yeah, there's different things out there, but when I looked at it, I was like, oh no, I kind of relate to that more than I relate to this, where I'm from. And then I just said, okay, we're all the same, we're all equal. It's just we just tell it in a different way. And so yeah, I didn't get too bogged down on that. I just gravitated towards just storytelling, no matter where it was from, what language it was from. And I just knew that was the human experience, and I knew it at a very early age. So I didn't get too bogged down in trying to differentiate the two and saying, okay, it's this and this. And yes, that exists. And it totally does. And they all emulate and copy each other. And they all, one will do this, John Ford will do this. Then Kurosawa will say, John Ford's my teacher as a director. And then Kurosawa will do this. And then Scorsese and Spielberg will copy Kurosawa. And then this guy will copy this. And then Clint Eastwood will copy Sergio Leone. After Leone teaches him, and it goes back and forth. So it's sort of a common thing of where everyone's passing down, the methods and the ways we're all telling stories, but they're all human stories.
Yeah, there's so much similarity too between the Westerns and the samurai films. You just have to assume there's a lot of back channel talk between the directors, and as they say themselves, they were communicating and they were sharing ideas. But when you watch a samurai film and a Western, it's almost like you get it's almost the same emotion watching. It is
the same emotion. It's the same as watching Bullet. And that's a Western with cars. So, I mean, what's the difference? I mean, whether a sheriff rides into town or a cop is in San Francisco or, wherever he's at, it's still the same thing. You know what I mean? And you have to look at it like that. But it's just the machine changes, the technology changes, and things like that. But it's still the same story. It's always good versus evil. It used to be more so, and that's become a little bit more relative in what those boundaries are. But in those senses of cultures like that in America at the time, there was a very definitive idea of what that was. So people told cinema through that lens.
So, I want to talk about getting into martial arts.
Oh, you talking about me?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, it was all because of movies. I mean, when I was a young kid, my dad was a policeman. He worked at a theater as an extra job to help pay for me and my sister. And because he didn't have a babysitter, he would take me to the theater and he would say, here's a popcorn bowl and a cup, and you can watch all these kung fu movies for 6 hours while I work. And so I went and I watched all these kung fu movies, and I was like, Bruce Lee, this guy, that guy. I was like, man, what's going on here? And this and that. And then one day I said, Dad, hey, I want to do kung fu, I want to do karate, whatever it was called. Everybody was, there was only karate and kung fu back then. Not much Taekwondo. Taekwondo came into the vernacular right after. But yeah, I was like, hey, I want to go do that. And he says, are you sure? And I said, yeah. So he took me, and we just happened to land at a school that was teaching Taekwondo. And that's how I got involved. And the rest is history. And then I was just sort of in love with that because it was, not only were the movies escapism, but so was martial arts, because martial art was an escapism for me to, formulate myself with structure and a discipline that I didn't have, the chaos around me. So what martial arts gave me was sort of like this secret window that I can go away and pretend to be this karate guy, that was doing things, and it worked. And then I fell in love with it. I did that for a while. And, amongst other things, I was a dancer, I was a gymnast. I tried to do anything that had any kind of physical movement, but soccer, but it was the martial arts that was able to give me an identity into what my purpose could be, that if I put in the hard work that I can show someone. And I just emulated everything that I saw through cinema and all the guys, and I was just trying to emulate them constantly, like we all do. And that's where it all came about. And I fell in love with it, and you can never take it away from me. So it was instilled in me, and that's where it all began.
Did you find it easy to go from Taekwondo to mimicking what you were watching on screen?
Very, very much so, because like I said, I was a hyper kid, so I was always moving around like a clown, like Burt Lancaster is a trapeze artist. That's an old one for you guys. But I just found that I love movement, and whether it was dance, gymnastics, turning upside down. I was a break dancer. Anything to just turn your body 6 ways from sideways. And I think that martial arts is a lot like that. If you look at Tai Chi, if you look at, they're dancing, they're moving. Rhythm in boxing, rhythm in Taekwondo, rhythm in karate they're moving, they're dancing. It's like West Side Story, the Sharks against the Jets. You're in and out. It's fencing. And that's the basic premise. So basically the movement that I did, Eric, was that I loved all movement, but I loved the rhythm of the movement of combat, of facing against somebody else, even though it was structured and it was very archaic at the time, because in that time it's classical karate, classical Taekwondo. It was very safe, and everything's done mostly in theory. Most martial art is in theory. You're always practicing theory, but what it does teach you is it teaches you distance and probability of what you might be able to do, right? And I always enjoyed that, and there was always that myth, but between what martial arts was and how it did, but I never wavered from it. I loved anything that moved and anything that it taught me rhythm, and I was just listening to the pulses and the sounds of what was happening, almost like Bob Fosse is a choreographer. You look at these things and you try to find it, and that happened to me very, 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 very early. and I just said, hey, I'm good at it. Let me just keep doing it because I didn't put my mind in anything else, and I put my mind to that, and I became very good at it.
Did your Taekwondo master foster this desire for you to do movies as well?
No, but the first taste that I ever got to knowing somebody that had made movies was my master's best friend, and his name was Bobby Kim. And he was a Korean guy, and he did a lot of those Hong Kong movies in the 70s. And he was making a movie called The Deadly Kick. And it was right after A Force of One that Chuck Norris did. And it had all the same usual suspects in it. And I used to hang out with him as a kid, and I would go to his house. And then one day we went to this Pizza Hut, and he said, I'm doing a special screening of a movie I'm playing. We're like, whoa, whoa. And I'm like 11 years old or something like that. And this movie Deadly Kick came on, and there's Bobby Kim. He looks like Charles Bronson. And I was like, holy smoke. And then he's got these bell-bottom pants on with these zipper boots and stuff, and he's like smoking a cigarette. And I was like, oh my God. And I was like, okay, cool. That's badass. And I was like, but I'm connected to that guy. Like, he was one of my like guys who were teaching me martial arts, but I had no concept of what it meant. But I just saw something that happened. I was like, all right, I might want to try that. And so that was the closest I came.
So what came next then in the journey to doing stunts?
What's that? Say it again, Eric.
What came next for you in the journey to get into stunts?
Well, I just continued down that path. Like I continued to master. Like I got involved in sport Taekwondo. I was on the U.S. team for many years. A top 3 competitor for 10 years. And I made the U.S. team many, many, many times from the age of 18 to 26. I just chose that path because I love the sports. I love the, when I saw the 80 hockey team in the 1980s win that gold medal, I said, I want to go to the Olympics. And that's one of the reasons why I pursued Olympic Taekwondo, is like, I wanted to go to the 88 Olympics because Taekwondo was fresh into the Olympic movement at that point. Didn't quite make it. I took 3rd place in Olympic trials. But stayed with it and still did what I did and competed in many, many various tournaments that taught me a lot about life, but all with the mind, that I wanted, like when I retired, I wanted to try to be some kind of pseudo actor or be in films, but you don't really understand what it is and this and that. But I just kept doing that, Eric. Like I was fighting, and with all the idea of like, when I stop fighting, I'm going to try to go and be Bruce Lee or Chuck Norris or, whatever guy I'm watching. And that's exactly what happened. So as soon as I retired from Taekwondo, I moved out to LA with $50 in my pocket and went for it.
Do you think that there are other guys in Taekwondo at the time who had the same aspirations that you did?
They were, but they weren't as deep. And I can tell you that. But there's, in the stunt community and this and that, and going all the way back to Bobby Kim and the Korean fighters of the Hong Kong films, Taekwondo has a big history involving itself into cinema. So there was a few people that, entertained it. I wanted to be in there, like Dana He was an Olympic gold medalist who went off to be a stunt woman. JJ Perry, myself, Tim Conley. There's a few guys out there that have been around doing that. You know what I mean? But so we all had our different paths. We all did what we did. Everybody wanted to, they all had their different strengths. So we just kind of ended up where we ended up.
What was the culture like with you guys coming up with, would you come up with kicks thinking like, we're going to use this for film someday, or this is useful for sparring? What was that like when you're training with these guys?
Well, like I said, they weren't, but I was. So I was always experimenting with triple kicks and double kicks and quadruple kicks. And I was emulating what was on the screen. And I would actually do that in practice, and I would get reprimanded by my coaches all the time. They would say, what are you doing? Like, you're out of your mind. You look like you're in a Kung Fu movie. I said, yeah, but I think it can work because I'm good at it. And then I would do it. And then eventually I started just kind of implementing like super jumping kicks and 720s and because I was doing the 720 and the 540 in the late 80s. Before it even went into the vernacular and the contemporary world of the NASCA karate circuit. And I remember that very vividly. And I saw it from a Korean demonstration team. I think it might've been even pre-Tiger team, the Tiger demonstration team. There was a fighter named Cham Yong Sam from Korea. We called him the Leaper. And when he fought, he would jump in the air and he would do a flying side kick, kick. And he would do that in actual competition. I said, that's the guy I want to be. And then I saw him do a 720 just showing off in the ring. And then he followed it up with a jump kick. And I was like, okay, now if this guy can do that, and he's only 1%. I said, if this guy can do it, I said, there's something there. So yeah, I took everything from that and I started practicing that with my gymnastics and breakdancing background. I started before pre-tricking, I started playing around with that kind of stuff. And yeah, I wasn't the first to do 720, but I was the first to use it in competition in the United States. And I was the first to spread it in America after I learned from the Koreans. And I think that, that's well documented.
So going from Olympic Taekwondo into American stunts, what was that transition like?
Well, it was relatively easy because I had a skill and I had something to offer. But it was relatively hard in the sense that you have to break in and you have to prove yourself and you have to kind of find your way into the narrative where you come in. So, I knew that I was gifted. I mean, that's no question. I can do what I can do. The question for me is do I get around the right people that allows me to do that in the proper way without me just sort of falling the wayside? And I did. And, one of the first shows I did an audition for was a show called WMC Masters. And I had a lot of the karate guys and Taekwondo guys and people like that auditioned for it. And I got on that show. I didn't quite make the lead on one of the shows. They had a character for me called Mr. Hollywood, but I ended up playing a ninja. And the two directors on those shows were Isaac Florentine and Pat Johnson. And those are the first directors I ever worked for. And Isaac Florentine, as you know, is a staple in the martial art action community in the world as a director. And Pat Johnson as well. He was the one who did the Karate Kid, the Ninja Turtles, and he was also in Enter the Dragon. And he used to train Steve McQueen. And he was, it came from the Chuck Norris system. And he discovered me. He says, "Kid, you got talent. You remind me of Bruce Lee." And I said, "Thank you, sir." And I said, "Well, not even close." He says, "No, just because you're hyper." And that's his point. I said, "Well, thank you, sir." And he's the one that says, "Listen, you come to LA. Look me up." I said, "Yes, sir." So as soon as I got done with that show and I retired from Taekwondo, I drove out there and I did. And I started, doing anything and everything that I could do. And I stayed in contact with him. I stayed in contact with Isaac. And then I just met 100 other people that were involved in the industry that I was about to get into, that I met, and that sort of solidified my career. And then I just sort of let my hard years of 15 years of working in Taekwondo and things like that come to fruition into the film. And, actions speak louder than words. But I had to learn the trade of it. I had to learn the rhythm of it and the concept of it. You can be talented and you can kick good and punch good and you can do all these things good, but it doesn't mean anything when it comes to laying down something when it comes to film.
So what was the stunt scene like for you back then?
Well, it was no holds barred because we were coming off the 80s, right? And everyone was emulating the 70s. And everything was growing and transitioning into, something new. But we all just kept borrowing to the old, which was the impact. And if I had to say, analyzing it from now to then, we focused 1,000%, 100% more on story. It wasn't about putting a sentence or a language together and doing this, because we said, okay, look, we reserve that to Jackie Chan. We reserve that to this guy or that guy. It was just about, like, okay, we need to just do a beautiful kick. And it was all about a very pithy, kick and then impact and then a push in close-up shot of the hero, which is classic, 60s, 70s, stuff like that. And then that was it. And the audience was like, "Oh, dang, that guy's great." Like Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris would do one spin hook kick and it'd be like, "Oh no, he didn't just do that," right? Holy smoke. That was the greatest thing I've ever seen. But Jackie Chan would go through a ballet. He would go through Singing in the Rain to get to his punchline. And then everybody like, "What the hell did I just watch?" And I say, "You just watched the Fred Astaire and the Gene Kelly of, action cinema, So there was two different sort of things that were going on. It was the, very masculine language of story and I can kick your butt, to the art of okay, let's put together a musical. Let's put together a scene. And I was caught right in the middle of that because I love both of them. And I gravitated towards the musical because I was a dancer and this and that. And I loved the language of it. And I loved it. It was almost like, playing a song. And so in the 90s, it was sort of a mentality of that, because, you had, heroes like Michael Dudikoff and Gary Daniels and, Daniel Bernhardt and Jean-Claude Van Damme and, and on down the list. I mean, it was just tons of them. There was probably 20 or 30 of them that were just really good and unique, and they all made their mark. But there was still something missing, because it was still about the muscle. It was still about the muscle. There was still something missing in the dance of action that Hong Kong cinema had done before, and borrowed from the West, in my opinion, in that regard. And I like that. I really wanted to go towards that because it requires you to memorize a whole sort of book of what you're doing, as opposed to one or two things and then tell a story. Both are effective. Both are beautiful. Just like I said, in a Good, the Bad, the Ugly. I mean, it's beautiful to see one little small move, or like in a Takeshi Kitano movie, in Japan, where he's very minimalistic and he just, hits a guy or he grabs a guy and then the camera poses. You don't have to do all that, but you have to find a balance of what you're trying to present. And I think they're both are effective, but I like the longer set pieces as a whole, because they're very hard to do.
It kind of makes you wonder, because you also, throughout the 50s, you had amazing American musicals, obviously, but you also had the swashbuckler films, which also have very long sequences that when you watch them now, they kind of, Fred Astaire's Three Musketeers, it looks like a Hong Kong movie. But I mean, why didn't they ever use that mentality when doing a fist fight, for example? Is it just a totally different way of thinking?
Well, for one, yes, because a lot of that became lost knowledge. And a lot of it went by the wayside, because if you look at the 20s and 30s, the heyday of silent cinema and Buster Keaton and Harold Lloyd and Charlie Chaplin, that's some of the best cinema that's ever been recorded in the history of cinema in the last, say, 120 years, 1896 or whatever it was. And the type of set pieces they did there were so grand, almost from a beyond vaudevillian or Shakespearean mentality, is that when you go further along, everything gets shrunk down and gets lessened, because the character changes, the mentality changes, what people's eye are used to changes, the type of wit, the type of humor, the type of, what people accept as a norm. And there was a lag, in my opinion, from the 50s. Some people say 50s is one of the worst decades of cinema. I might have to agree. It wasn't until people started taking drugs and rebelling to the point where they had to get so angry that they started doing this counterculture, theater and movies. And that's a part of the Kung Fu movement, and without that, you wouldn't have anything. So I think it's, it's very important to realize that. So I think that, that stuff in the 20s, 30s, and even some of the great musicals of the 30s and 40s were lost, because it takes too much patience and it requires too much knowledge to do it. And there's not enough artists to do it. So you need those artists to do it. I think that there started to become sort of a renaissance lately, in the last 20 years, where filmmakers of our generation have said, look, we want to do an homage to these people. We want to bring this stuff back. We want to do longer sequences. We want to, let people see that it's the actor dancing, it's John Wayne riding the horse. It's, Burt Reynolds driving the car. It's, like, we want to see this stuff. And that's where, for a while it was kind of dropped, you know what I mean? Because it just took too much to do. And then when you did see it, let's say a 1970s movie like a Billy Freakin's French Connection, okay, or a Bullet, you were like, holy smoke, that's the greatest thing in cinema history. So when people reference those movies, they go, my God, that is the greatest car chase and the greatest thing, blah, blah, blah. Well, all they did is expound upon what was done before, but they just added their own grit to it. And that's the difference. It's taking time to do those set pieces properly. And that became something of current that you see that Chad's bringing back with the John Wick stuff, you know, guys from my generation, JJ Perry, David Leitch, you know, those are the American directors. Obviously the Asian directors have been doing it forever. The Chinese, Korean, and Japanese directors, and there's a list of hundreds of them, but they've always stayed constant. You know, it was kind of us to kind of catch up to that void, because I think the 90s is again a very weird time in cinema. It's just like people like, it's all corporate, it's all cookie cutter. There's no emphasis on trying to do something different, because if it does, it takes money, it takes time, and people just want to. It's an assembly line of what you have to do to push it on. So it's not till recently that people are now really starting to get this nostalgic. Oh, we need to do this and do this. It's sexy. And, you know, that's where we're at now in the state of cinema.
Well, the 90s are really interesting also because it's when you had the Hong Kong wave of actors and directors coming into Hollywood.
Correct.
And the stunt
Correct.
guys coming in.
Correct. Correct.
Do you remember that time? And
well, yeah, I do, because remember, yeah, I do, because remember that plane that I just said, they were constant. Hollywood kind of goes, okay, we're going to wake up and we're going to do Kill Bill. We're going to do Charlie's Angels, and we're going to bring Wu Ping, and we're going to, or do Matrix and this and that. And we're going to, or Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon and this and that. And you see all this stuff. We're going to bring that because, yeah, that's what we need, because that's Chinese cinema is fantasy theater. That's what it is. And it's some of the most beautiful stuff that's ever recorded when you watch it. It's like listening to a beautiful song. And when you watch it, it's like, wow. And so Hollywood's like, hey, we want some of that, because, you know, Wu Ping and Jackie Chan just did Rumble in the Bronx, and he's doing this. And okay, now we're picking up steam. I remember participating in Batman and Robin. I was in Batman, and I was in the fourth one. I played Robin, doubled him, and I got the job through Pat Johnson and the whole deal. And in the third one, if you remember, he did an homage to the laundry scene where he's doing the laundry, doing Kung Fu. That was taken from a Chinese film. I'm not sure the name of it. You'll probably know it 100%.
Good not.
Yeah. Okay. So the point is, they were already taking from the East the way the East took from the West, and we were borrowing back from the art that they stayed true to. And that's the era that I came up in, and I got to experience that. And it was different, and it was a learning tool. Doing Batman, they kept saying, we want to be more like Hong Kong. And I go, what does that mean? I go, okay, you want Robin to be a martial artist? Okay, cool. We can kick some butt. He's like, yeah, but he's a trapeze artist. Okay, cool. We can have him break dance too. No problem. Whatever you want. And then it started trickling. And then, of course, we got into Blade. Blade was the pinnacle. And I participated in Blade right after Batman and Robin. I double Frost in there, and that was my first big. I had no idea what was being done there, but what happened there was we did an homage to all those movies. And I remember us training and putting the thing together with Jeff Ward and the whole crew. They were like, oh, we want to emulate this. We want to emulate this. We want to do some this. And we were like, okay, cool. We didn't understand what that meant. We were just borrowing. We were just literally stealing. Like, we want to do that. And we did it, and we stole it, and the movie worked. And what you had there was probably one of the most gritty American pop culture things, a rated R film, that people went, wow, okay, cool. And that was right before The Matrix. And who changed The Matrix was Wu Ping, you know, and obviously the Wachowskis with the visual and the bullet time, because the one shot itself defined the whole movie. The one shot itself, and that's a visual expression. It had nothing to do with Wu Ping. Wu Ping just put the martial arts inside the mind of what was happening inside the movie. And it was beautiful. So yeah, in that time you have Blade, Matrix, the transition between, you know, Hollywood calling for Hong Kong, and I was a part of that. And I did this funny show called with Sammo Hung. Actually, I'm thinking about 25 things right now, but yeah, with Sammo Hung. And he came over here, and Stanley Tong was the director and creator, along with Andre Morgan, the old producer, the Bruce Lee stuff. And that's where it really all took off for me, of really understanding the profound effect of sort of Hollywood kind of coming back and paying for their sins of not listening to these guys, because, you know, what they did is they just started making action stuff fun again by turning into that theatrical, musical, rhythmic song as opposed to the overly the top machismo Americanism of I got to be this tough guy that, you know, only hits people one punch or, you know, shoots people one bullet. I remember being on a set maybe 100 times with actors, and every actor's like, well, I wouldn't do that. I would just take them and do this. I said, yeah, sure you would. Yeah. I'm 6 foot tall and handsome. Hit your mark and say your line. You know, and I'll never forget it because they're like, oh, you know, that's the way I would do it. Or I would never hold a gun like this. Says, you don't know what you're talking about. And that was the problem with Hollywood, is everybody was in their heads and everybody thought that they were this. Whereas the Kung Fu stars that were the muses of the performances were real. The Donnie Yens, the Jackie Chans, all these guys were it. They were Fred Astaire. They were that. Whereas the Hollywood stars, they were just sort of a cheap suit thinking they were tough. And that's where it all changed. And I'm glad it changed because it really opened up a whole spectrum of getting rid of that crap. Because we need the Arnold Schwarzenegger and all that stuff and looking at my bicep stuff because that's fun. Don't bother my friend. He's dead tired. Cut. Moving on. We love that. But what we want to get is into the movement of what we're doing. And this is better.
So do you think I mean any more notes on martial law before moving on? You work with Sammo. I mean, what's it like working with the Daigo?
Well, I realized that when I was working with him, that was the most special thing happening to me at that moment. And all I did is keep my head down and learn from him the same way I did as my coaches and this and that at the time. And I was just so respectful and humbled to be around him. Every time he said something, I would jump 6 feet high. I would watch him. He would sit around and he would look at us because he had his own team there. He had like Alan Sitt and Richard Hot Talk. You know, there was a lot of legends that were there at the time that were trying to like teach a bunch of crazy Americans how to understand their language. And luckily for myself and about 10 of us at the time, we picked it up. We loved it. We understood. And we said, teach us. And we did. And I think the greatest thing was just watching him like an old painter, like an old master. He would just sit and watch and, you know, and sometimes we'd have a cigarette and he would make us, and we would run in circles like, you know, crazy and little birds for a while. And then he would like put out a cigarette. He says, okay, Clay, come here. You stand here. Richard, put camera here. I'm tired. I want to go home. This is the shot. And I'm saying, okay. And then he come to me and says, Clayton, is it okay I touch today? I said, yes, sir. Okay, I'm going to touch. Roll action. He'd go, bam, bam. He'd do this whole sequence without ever rehearsing it. Come in and do this, boom, boom, boom. Smack me in the head, smash me like that. And then we go cut. And he goes, okay, I'm going home. Good luck. And I'll be like, did he just do that? He didn't even rehearse. And he just nailed everything. And I was like, now that's what it's like watching Gene Kelly orchestrate Singing in the Rain. And that was the beauty of it, just to witness that. And I tell you what, I'll never be that. But to watch him do that, it really puts it in perspective. He's probably got over 1 million hours of knowledge. You know, he learned from Bruce Lee, you know, Enter the Dragon, Game of Death, the whole deal, Chinese opera school. But he was something else. He really was Buster Keaton. And I'm happy I got to see it. And I know a lot of people have. He's very cordial to Western filmmakers, you know, like Richard Norton and Bob Wall, you know, in Game of Death. And he was very, very nice, and he understood. He says, look, you're not going to move like me. You didn't come from the Chinese opera, but we can do what you can do good, and then I'll help you. And I was like, that guy's great. And I was like, cool, because I can't do it like you, sir. And he's like, don't worry about it. I'll just smack you in the face. And he goes, I got to go home. So
It's an amazing story.
Yeah.
So do you think, so after martial law, do you think that movies and action styles like The Bourne Identity sort of helped bring in a new era of actors that were just performing their own action on camera, despite how it might be shot and edited? It was a style that allowed actors to be the action star again in a very technical way. What was your perception of that whole era?
Well, it goes what I said. You know, it started after you know, Whoopi in the Matrix, but, you know, you see the John Wicks, but if you want to go before that, I'm not jumping up and down about, you know, Matt Damon taking a pencil and doing a few moves, you know, like this and doing this with a camera doing that. That doesn't impress me. Like, who cares? You know, I'm more impressed with Keanu Reeves being 56 years old and judo throwing a guy and then choking him out and then shooting a guy, reloading his gun in camera, walking off, knowing what he's doing. That impresses me. So, but to get to your question, yes, you're right. It started a little bit from there, you know, because Wesley Snipes did everything in Blade, right? He didn't get doubled unless he was obviously in a vehicle, you know, and something high dangerous and things like that. But Wesley was an athlete. I think that started with that, and then Wu Ping and Chad and those guys pushed those guys to do their own stuff in the Matrix as much as they could. You saw the wire work there. You saw that stuff. And then it progressed into that world. And then, yeah, I think that we started to wake up again, and we started demanding more out of these actors and said, you need to be more like Steve McQueen. You need to be more like Clint Eastwood. You need to be more like Burt Reynolds, who did his own stunt jumping out of the plane for Hal Needham. You need to do that stuff. And all it takes is you give me 2 weeks to learn how to do that, or give me 3 weeks, or give me this and that, right? And I think it's good we did that, because enough's enough. Because the myth behind the stuntman became to the point where the stuntman was the medicated answer for everything, when the stuntman should not be. The goal of the film, the goal of the character, and the goal of what you want to be is you want to get the actor to do as much as you can, like Bamundo in France, when he used to do the French films. Okay, now he was a little bit crazy, so that's kind of a hard analogy, but there was a different time, but still, he did it. And it was very interesting watching him do that, because it was like the sacrifice that he had to learn that. It was very interesting watching Paul Newman drive his own cars, because he was a race car driver. It's something's exciting about that. Something's really exciting about that, because that person has to suffer the long hours of learning that and understand the risk of it. And I think for fights, you have to do the same thing. You have to push the actor to embark on that journey. You can't just say, hey, you're the character, but then you're not doing the character's moves. You can't just come up for a close-up and give one eye wink and say you're the character. No, you must learn your physical lines the same way we all do. And it's imperative that you do that in playing this character if you want to be an action star. And so I'm a big advocate of not doubling people. I don't like the double actors. I hate it. And you're like, well, wait a minute, isn't that your profession? Isn't that job security? I said, no, I'm a storyteller. I'm an advocate of actors doing their own thing. A stuntman is a risk taker for a stunt. Since when is 99% of things stunts? Only less than 0.1% is stunts. Everything else is movement. Do you think a fight scene is stunts? A fight scene is not stunts. A fight scene is a fight. A stunt is a 40-foot high fall on fire or a car crash. That's a stunt. So people confuse fighting with stunts. I don't. Fighting is fighting. Learn your lines. Risk, car crash, I'll double you. Fighting, I'm not doubling you. What? You mean you're not doubling me? I said, no, you're going to learn your lines, dude. Okay? Learn your lines. That way we believe it's you playing the character. And that's been my sort of take when I approach actors and people like that, is like, well, what are you doing then? What good are you? You're going to be nothing in 5 years if you don't make this yours. You know, and they're like, oh, yeah, you're right. I say, exactly. Put in the work. Because don't pass it all to the stunt guy who's put in the work when you're the character and you're the one that's making $20 million and you don't want to do your lines. And that's the, you know, and we all need to be like that, to be honest with you. So I'm very adamant about that. As much as you can get away with. There are certain situations you can't. But if it's just a normal thing, learn your lines, your action lines, not your verbal lines. And they go, well, you know what that does, Eric? It sends them on a journey. What happens is they reject it in the beginning, then they do it, and then at the end they come back and says, I can't thank you enough how you transformed my life into making me do something that I didn't think that I could. And I will never be the same person, and I will always approach this. And that's exactly the way Tom Cruise approaches cinema. So Tom Cruise is a big idol to a lot of these people because he learns his action lines.
Yeah.
So we should all be more like Tom Cruise.
Is that the approach you took when doing something like Bunraku early on?
1000%, as much as I can get away with, you know. And there's risk in all that. You know, people are going to get hurt. Things are going to happen. But I mean, what are we doing? Are we doing a make-believe world? We're doing physical action. You know, the movie's about violence. So, you know, things are going to happen. But you can also do a musical and you can have 3 people in your cast sprain their ankle. And now you don't got a movie. Would you say, hey, we shouldn't rehearse this? No, it's imperative that we rehearse. It just happened that they sprained their ankle. And this is how you have to view, you go at it as a stunt coordinator to minimize your risk 1000% as much as you can. But knowing that there's always that one little thing where you're going to get a nick, you're going to get this, you're going to get that, but you keep moving forward. And so far, it's worked. And so far in the history of cinema, it's worked. So to look at it any other way is we must all take that risk. That's my opinion on the whole process.
So around, I think it was 2008, you called me up, you came and visited, and you kind of opened up my eyes to where I could take indie filmmaking. At the time for you, did you have your eyes on these kind of crazy indie filmmakers, and we were doing these backyard samurai movies, and what was your inspiration there?
No, I didn't. I had zero eyes on it because I was so involved with trying to produce low budget action movies and things like that. I had been developing like hundreds of scripts and trying to get these movies at these small companies. I mean, like even like the old PM Entertainments and the Roger Cormans and the, you know, like there was tons of them. And that existed back when I was trying to do that. You know, you had the video market and you had the B movie and you know, you can make a movie for $1 million with the right mentality, you know, and that's what people did. So the indie world, I was sort of oblivious to because I was so focused. It wasn't until when I was talking to my good friend JJ Perry, a good buddy of ours. He says, hey man, you should take a look at these cats. Stunt people. I was like, stunt who? And he's like, no, just take a look at them. And I looked at it, and it took me less than 3 seconds to realize that there was something special happening. And I was like, okay, something's going on here. There's a freedom. There's an independent emulation of beauty here. There's guys that are just like not doing what Hollywood's doing. Hollywood's dead because it's stuck in its own, you know, ways of doing crap. What I saw in that independent movement, especially yours, because yours is the first that I saw. There were others that followed. It hit me. And I was like, damn, this is the future. I go, this is what it's like, because these are the only people that are going to retain the integrity of cinema. These are the only people that are going to retain the integrity of the musical, because they're emulating it and they're doing it well. And then what they're going to do is they're going to pass that thing off. So when I saw you doing what you're doing to some people, I immediately says, holy shit, we got to make movies around these guys. Like, you know, screw that guy, you know, jokingly, but, and that's where it all began. And then that's where it happened, you know? And so, you know, obviously immediately, you know, trying to be a young, thriving producer at the time, I immediately called you up and, you were like, who the hell are you? And I said, I'm Clayton Barber. You're like, why are you calling me? I said, because I saw your videos. You're like, okay, what do you want? I was like, nothing really. I just want to come and see you tomorrow. You cool? You available? You're like, sure. And so I got on a plane and I came up and saw you just to talk to you. And by that discovery, it was a beautiful thing because, you know, I realized that you were living in a world all by yourself, creating all these things, self-taught, everything's self-taught, from the technology to the camera to, because you weren't originally a martial artist, but you started picking it up and you started learning Hapkido and Taekwondo and things like that. And then you picked it up. I found that fascinating because I was like, okay, cool. Because that's all it takes, a little drive. And that's where it came about. And that's why I came up and saw you, Eric.
Oh, one of the greatest moments in my life. I didn't know what the hell to make of it the first time, but then after Death Grip, it all made sense when we did.
Yeah. Well, you did such a good job on Death Grip, but everyone still needs a coach, and everyone still needs every player, every person in life. I wasn't that guy, but what I saw in there was a guy who made a damn good film that I was like, wow, that's on par with emulating like Takeshi Kitano. If you remember hearing our first conversations, I said it had a very simplicity to it that was beautiful. And I was like, okay, cool. All right, you're not playing around in a formulated sandbox that Hollywood created, because you have to do the formulated sandbox. You got to get, the guy gets out of jail, his wife is killed, he seeks revenge, he falls in love with the bartender. End of your movie, kiss, you got it. Okay, but that wasn't Death Grip. You dealt with a guy, a brother that was impaired. You were dealing with some other different issues, but the scenes were epic. They were singing in the rain and this and that because they were long, and they were the rhythmic. They were like drum lines of bam, 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 and you were emulating all this stuff. It didn't matter at the time where you were at, but you were doing it. You understand what I mean? And it was done well for having nothing. You did that with nothing. And so I felt like, hey man, since you're already a champion, what if I help you? Like, what if I try to expose new ideas to you, or play a big brother role and sort of like being like Sammo, and that's where it came about. So that's where our relationship began.
It was a very good relationship. It has been a great relationship ever since.
Let's don't bring the audience down. Come on, Eric. Let's not.
Yeah. So when can you talk about what was your impetus for the idea behind Blindsided?
The impetus for the idea behind Blindsided was very simple. It was about finding a hook that was well known, that we could identify and personalize in our own way in our time, by using the Zatoichi blind fury mentality of a blind swordsman, which is the love and the nostalgia. Like when I talk about musicals, or we talk about old films or this and that, Casablanca, whatever. There's a nostalgia with Zatoichi. There's a nostalgia with that character. There's a nostalgia with the man with no name riding into town, and things like that. So I just loved it. I love the obstacles to it, the minimalism to it, and and thinking about it, I was like, after watching you, and we had done Rope-a-Dope, and I watched you, how you directed your movie, that all this stuff, and I was like, all right, your heart wants to do something like Harold Lloyd, Buster Keaton, Charlie Chaplin, this and that. Well, I said the only character you can do is a blind man, because now you can't see. And so that was it. And it was also just doing an homage to something that I love. And I felt by running that mentality through you as a muse who could play it was the perfect combination to do something simple, easy, and fun.
It's kind of, when you mentioned the early American kind of the old school American stunt way, which was very story and character focused.
Yes.
You're kind of bringing that back.
Correct. Well, I'm trying to bring it back. I mean, I'm not, no, to be honest, let's be clear. I'm not trying to bring anything back. All I'm trying to do is emulate something that I saw that was good, that I think that is missing today. It's almost like pragmatism, wisdom, and common sense. Oh, I went there, right? Oh, wow. See, that might stimulate a few people. So and film is the same way. So I wanted to, look, we can be as radical as we want to be. We can shake the camera as long as we want. It's not going to dilute the fact that we're not doing anything good. So I do it as a director, as a second director. When things are bad, I shake the camera because I have to hide the world. And I'm honest about that. And I go to the DP and it says, my man, I need you to save me here. I need you to shake the camera for me, baby. And he looks at me and he says, I get it. Frame up tight. Let's go home. All right. Now, when I'm not framing up tight or shaking the camera, I'm coming back and I'm enjoying the process. And I think that's a very, very important thing to try to do.
Now, in the Creed movies, though, you didn't have to shake the camera. Those are very, I mean, that's very, it's not simple boxing, but it's very, what would you say? Like you're not hiding anything with the Creed action.
No, we're not. And we're going thematically on what we're talking about. I set out to do Darren Aronofsky's Black Swan, a violent ballet of a boxing match where that's not cutty, but is constant, that flows like the camera and sweeping shots, like the swashbuckling movies and like the plays. You look at West Side Story, the camera pushes in as they exit frame, the camera pulls out as they enter frame, the camera sweeps this way. Like this is what's happening inside the elements of a violent ballet or a musical. I tried to do that inside a boxing movie that I had no idea of what I was doing. Okay, so I'm not a boxer. Okay, I boxed when I was a kid. You don't have to be a boxer to tell a good story. You just have to listen. You have to study the precedent of what was done from the masters like Rocky and this and that. They created the modern day boxing movie. And you have to study the old classics before that. And you have to study, like, what are you trying to do? Because what is the contemporary audience looking at? And what is the eye trained to do? This is very important. And I had no idea. But when I did the Creed, led by the leadership of Ryan Coogler, I found confidence in trying to copy it. And it was Ryan Coogler who said, I want to do Darren Aronofsky's Black Swan. And I went, bingo. And I said, okay, we do it. So, and that's where that whole thing came about, because it was all about, I didn't have to get bogged down that I wasn't a boxer. I know how to tell a story with a pinky, a fist, a knife, a gun, a foot, a bat, a pencil. It doesn't matter what you're telling the story with. What matters is the language that you're writing when you're telling the story with those instruments. So you've got two fists. Tell the story with and make it exciting. The only way you do that is you have to create rhythm, and you have to involve the camera to make the audience not so blind and monotonous to what you're doing, because the performance will expose itself eventually, like all boxing movies. There's never been a boxing movie that's been perfect and no one cares. If you watch Rocky, if you watch the action in it, they're missing by 3 feet, but everyone's loving it. They're going, yes, go. And I realized that, but you can't do that in a Kung Fu movie. Okay, you can't miss that much in a martial art movie, but in an American boxing movie, you can, because the drama is so high that you don't care about the move. So I was like, okay, well, how do you find a balance to that, of sort of a happy medium, that of hitting the ball in the spot and creating a story with rhythm that's moving and the audience is entertained, like a martial art movie or a ballet or a musical. And that's how it came about.
It's amazing putting together an interesting fight scene when you have 4 moves, right?
Exactly.
Like
you don't got nothing.
It's like a Chambara fight. You have 8 moves. Chambara is 1, 2. You have 8 angles and a stab, which almost never happens. And yet, Chambara fights are all predicated upon that drama. Yeah. That's sort of the same mindset that you went into doing boxing fights.
Well, yeah, I mean, you don't have a choice. You got steak or chicken, and you throw the chicken or hit the steak, baby. Let's go. That's a weird analogy, but you'll get the point. But you don't play the victim to that. What you do is you find a way that when something is boring or there's an old trope involved, you find a way to tell it with the camera or with the rhythm of the choreography. In that particular scene, the oneer that I did in Creed, those guys rehearsed that, hundreds of times. And they approached it like a musical. And I told them there's going to be no cuts. So if you screw up, we're screwed. And I said, the studio is going to pay millions of dollars for this. And if you mess it up, we're done. We're done. And then once you put that through their thick skull, they start to take it serious and they go, okay, we're creating art here. Yeah, art is a loose word because I hate that word. But that's what's happening there. So you just got to rise to the occasion. I believe in them. I believe in everybody. I believe in the camera operators. Once you rehearse it, after that, it's just, your hands are up. So look, you got to get lucky. So, and that's the way you approach it.
You also did a long oneer with Josh Brolin in Old Boy, and I always
But I didn't do that. JJ
well,
did that with it. Yeah, I
sure,
participated in that. I was one of the guys in the scene.
yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
but I always wonder how it is you balance telegraphing with memorization with actors. So with a dance, you can sort of telegraph movements. It's okay. But with a fight, you have to look like things are a little bit more improvised. What is that like? Where do you draw that line? For example, in the Creed 2 oneer, right? Because at a certain point, you're punching, you're kind of ducking the next punch. How do you balance that?
You mean like, listen, the language of what you're doing when you're marrying it, how do you do anything in life? You have to be confident. Okay. If I'm memorizing a poem, I do it to the point where I can do it 6 ways backwards and sideways, right? Sometimes previously I've had actors, and I did that in that scene. I had Michael learn his lines, and I had Michael learn the other guy's lines, and I had the other guy learn his lines, and I had him learn. So I made him do it back and forth. Yeah, and the people are like, why are you doing that? It's because I want them to know cause and effect, action, reaction, yin and yang. I want them to understand that so that when they're in there, when they're doing their lines, that they know exactly the rhythm of the line that's coming and what they have to deliver and what they have to receive. And by doing that, repetition, like anything else, like brushing your teeth, you brush your teeth, you become very good at brushing your teeth while you're thinking about 26 different things. You can do anything brushing your teeth. You actually can read the paper.
I wish I wish my kids were like that, but I guess they'll get there.
They're not. But you see the premise that the more comfortable you get it, the more comfortable you get John Wick shooting a gun, the more reactionary he is, the more impulsive he is. I think that's how you have to try to push people to do, because it's flawed, because you're going to make a mistake sometimes because energy, and you might forget a piece and then it's going to cause a hiccup and then whatever. But that doesn't mean you can't pick right back up if there is an accident to go right back into where the algorithm fits to what you're doing. And by doing that, it just takes a certain professionalism, because you've seen dance numbers where people forget a dance step and they pick it right back up and they continue to go. And it's not till after the curtain closes that they cry. Right? So the same with anything else. You just have to do it enough to where you forget about it, learn it, and you minimize the chances of forgetting, and things like that. Was that what kind of you're looking for?
Yeah. That's great. Was that process any different when we went to China and did?
No different at all. No different at all. You take a young singer, and then within 6 weeks, you try to turn him into a boxer. He's taking every supplement in the world. He's giving up 12 hours doing what he's doing. But the magic to him was that he had the willpower and the heart and the drive to do it. And so he didn't perform as good as he could, but he performed good enough to get the job done, to tell the story, and he made it out safely. So yes, you approach that, each thing is different. You might have 6 weeks of somebody, you might have 2 weeks, you might have 6 months. If you got 6 months, then there's no excuses. Then from that point on, you're like looking at him on the set saying, hey, you own this, not me. You screw this up, it's your fault. Screw off. Get out of here. You know what I mean? But if you get a guy for 2 weeks, you get a guy for 6 weeks, there's a little bit more leniency in then how you have to coach them, how you have to nurture them, how you have to, foster them in order to give them the confidence to do something that's so out of their bounds. Imagine if you and I right now, someone said, hey, Clay and Eric, you got 6 weeks to sing Evita. So you'd have to have the best voice coach, the best teacher coming and saying, look, believe in yourself. You can do it. You're not quite hitting the high notes yet, but you can hit it here. Go here, do this, do that. And that's how you'd have to kind of, cultivate that, because it just takes a lifetime, because even Bruce Lee's flawed. Even Sammo's flawed. There's no one perfect. I get nervous and hyper anytime I do a fight scene. That doesn't negate the fact that I'm very good at what I do, but I still screw shit up. And I'm still imperfect, and I'm worried about, like, man, I'm not hitting this note right. It doesn't matter if you can kick this higher, kick this fast. What matters is how you can interpret that in the meaning of while you're doing it at that time. And that's the hardest part, because it's so foreign to you to squeeze the note at that time precisely. Whereas when you're in a gym, in a mirror, and when you're doing this stuff, oh, it's so easy to do that all day long. You could do that yawning, but you come to the camera, you come with all these elements, environment, weapon, atmosphere, this and that. All of a sudden, it's hard to hit that note. So a lot of it has to do with repetition to the point where you calm the blood pressure down to where you're able to focus on doing that and let rhythm happen naturally. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
You know, I just, like I said, Eric, I try to tell people the experiences that I've had, not my theory, not my intellect, I don't care about all that. What I care is I can only tell you stories of what I've experienced. It's like, hey, I climbed Mount Everest. On this side of the mountain, there's some rocks over here. It's very slippery. You know, I can't say to someone, well, there might be a hypothetical mountain and I might be Santa Claus and I might all this. And, you know, oh yeah, if Sammo would have only done this, or if Chad, you know, this is the problem with people is they talk too much. They talk too much about the wrong things because they're in their heads. The reality is that all these people that I'm talking about, all these things that you're hearing came from people who suffered and got it from 30 and 40 years of learning and putting their heads down. And they were the 10th man in control to number 9, all the way to number 1. Remember, all of us were helpers. We were all cooks. We were all students. And I prefer to be a student continually and to be confused about everything so that you gain intelligence from learning from people. I'm good at what I do, but there are 10,000 people that are much better than me at what I do. So I'm happy to contribute to that narrative by just providing information. And that's a beautiful thing.
One of the things that I was inspired by when we met was that you were well read, and we connected. Actually, we talked economics the first time you were here. We were talking economics and history, and it inspired me to start researching more on my side and learning. Do you find that your understanding of history, and because you have such a, you know, you've got a library of history books, do you find that helps you as an action designer and director?
1,000%. 1,000%. And I'm glad you brought that up. Books are books. What you read is subjective. What's the material? Who's the author? People comment. Okay, who are your teachers? Is it Aristotle? Is it Plato? Is it this guy or that guy? You know, what's going on here? Don't get involved in that. Read everything and anything. Be curious, right? So by virtue of that, yes. Because the same way we talked about in the very beginning of this interview is the way I saw Asian films when I started watching Asian movies when I was a kid. I was like, wow, this is something special going on here. That's the way I look at a book. No matter who the author is, I can still look at it. You know, you can take anything and gain from it, right? I don't have to read that book and go, oh, this author is bad. Or like, I hate Nietzsche, okay? Tolstoy, no, can't do that. No, these guys, you have to learn from everybody. But you have to learn from every single thing. And that's the point. Don't divide it into politics. Don't divide it into mankind. Divide it into thought. And I think that's very important. So when I look at books and history books, I look at that way. So when I approach cinema, I look at that way. I can go to China. And people says, well, how can you function there? I said, because I know the history of this place. I know the people. I know the mannerisms. I know the food. I know the smell. I know the language. And I know the humans behind all these people. They're good people. And they're telling a good story right now. So I don't give a shit about all this. You see what I'm saying? So I do the same thing when I go into Spain, Serbia, Bulgaria, it doesn't matter. I walk right in there and go, I'm at home here because I know your world and I want to tell the story that you're trying to tell. Because if you got bogged down on only telling stories that you want to tell from an ideological point of view, you're going to be a very boring box. No one's going to give a damn about you, right? But if you tell the story that 7 billion people can relate to, then we all can relate to that, then that's a very good thing. And the only way you come to that conclusion is learn as much as you can, listen twice as much as you speak, read, watch, and then execute. And I think that's very important as a storyteller. To not all, but for me. And I tried to pass on some of these things, as an older person to some of these young guys is Just listen more, learn more, read more, and you'll be able to relate to people more than just, oh, you're from a foreign country. Oh my God, we're so different. You get past that and you say, what's up, brother? Ni hao. And right away you connect and you're telling the same story no matter where you're from or what you do. You understand? Does that make sense?
Totally. The Korean kind of wave of action and how you've seen it influence or not influence Hollywood and world cinema. And what's your take on Korean action cinema, especially since the late 90s, early 2000s?
Right, late 90s, early 2000s was inspired 100% by American cinema. Most of its previous people, you know, all came and learned from the West and learned from the Chinese and Japanese cinema. You know, they were students and this and that. But what they did is they took it to a whole nother level. They revitalized cinema to a degree that's semi-Amerocentric in a certain capacity, but very secluded and identified into what's happening in their own society. Korea has gone through a big transformation in the last 20 and 30 years in their society, from multiple things, from their values to what people look at and things like that. And I think it's fantastic. You know, I was raised by a Korean man for a while. My master, I lived with him for 5 years, and he was a huge influence on me. The whole culture itself is an influence, but I think it's a beautiful thing. I think that Koreans have found their own identity the same way they did with Taekwondo. You know, they took karate and made it Taekwondo, whether you believe in that or not, but God bless you. You need to do a little more research. So, but the Koreans are smart like that, and they're very tenacious people. And they came from a impoverished third world country in the 1950s, eating kimchi out of the ground with no refrigerators, to becoming, you know, one of the top 6 nations in the world. But pop culturally, they also took it to another level, and they gravitated towards that Amerocentric thing, like breakdancing, music, you know, all these boy bands. And if you look at them, they're almost like a rendition. It's the opposite of Japan. Like, and they did the same thing with cinema. They just took that kicking mentality and that tricky mentality, like City of Violence. You know, when you watch City of Violence and you look at that, you're like, what the hell does this movie mean? It says it doesn't mean anything. Yeah, but it's entertaining as hell. Yeah, they're just kicking each other. It's cool as hell. It's about brothers, you know. It's like friends. Beautiful. I like
it's
that.
called, I think, in Korean, right? Isn't that what the name of it? Isn't the name of it in Korean Chingu? Isn't it brothers? Yeah.
Yeah, it might be Chingu. You know, maybe. But listen, to a broader point, I mean, going back to what you were saying, I think the Koreans have identified themselves as a major player, and even more so than Hollywood, and things like that, as far as directing contemporary violence, whether it's video games or, you know, visually, cinematically, Korean cinema is on par with anything in the world, you know, by far. And violently, they've created their own identity. You know, it's fundamentally different than Japanese cinema. It's fundamentally different than Chinese cinema. And, you know, we talk about this in sort of like, you know, these different little things, but it is true. I mean, you have a certain people and artists making cinema based on what they've done in the past and what they're doing now. And you either have revolutionary guys that are turning it up on its head, you know, or you don't, you know, and that happens in all of those places. You know, there's filmmakers that are just like throwing people for, well, what the heck just happened? You know, and there's guys that are just sort of saying, okay, let's stay to the script and let's find our identity with this kind of language, whether it be photographically or action design or this and that. I find it too inspiring, you know, in a way, because, you know, like I don't find much in Hollywood anymore, you know, so I have to look to India, Korea, you know, people say India, I say, yeah, India is like some of the most greatest inspiration that I can even find right now. I love Hollywood. I like what it does. I like, you know, sometimes this and that, but most of the time it's crap, you know, and then they just say, hey, why can't we just make a movie like Oh Boy? Why can't we just make a movie like that? Well, why can't you just do it without having the reference that? Why can't you just do it yourself? Because you don't know how, because you don't have the insight to it. You don't have the knowledge. You don't have the ability to do it, and you don't want to. And quite frankly, culturally, what's happening in all these different pockets, the way United States make movies, you know, Korea can't do it, and you can't do the same in Korea. You understand? We all have different rules when we're making cinema. Think about it, you know, everyone's society has different rules. Vietnamese cinema, you go like, you can't do certain things. That's why Johnny the Wind's movie couldn't be let out. You know what I mean? Because the communists said you can't make that movie. All right. So every country has its own rules. To me, don't suppress anything, let everything out there. But then again, I don't control that. But I try to search for those movies that are banned in certain places. And I don't look to the United States right now as a leader in cinema as progressive name, because it's too, focused on things that are not entertaining. And I think it's lost its soul. Perhaps in the future it will regain its soul. But right now, countries like Korea and this and that, they found their soul for a minute, and they're going to put some stuff out there, and it's going to be very shocking to the world. And we're going to follow it for a minute. So let it be a teacher for a while.
Yeah.
French cinema had their day.
Yep.
Italian cinema had their day. American cinema goes in and out. Chinese cinema is all over the place. It's very beautiful. Indian cinema has always been around. It's fantastic. So let all cinema break through and don't suppress any story.
You basically go and do this very kind of interesting raid in reverse film called The Princess.
Right.
It's a modern fairy tale. How did you approach the broader scope of the action design, given that you have, this sort of traditional fairy tale, except it's sort of told in reverse, right? Where the princess fights back.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, listen, the intention of the story changes in a sense that it's being reversed, that the princess is going to seek the revenge. Now, the only thing that changes when you go to think about action design, because you're always moving between either real world, cyberpunk, futuristic, sort of kind of some kind of weird thing here, or you're going backwards. So you're doing a period piece, which you do a lot if you're, say, like you're shooting a boxing movie and you're doing Muhammad Ali's, story. But look, there's contemporary, there's precedent, which is history, and then there's the future, which has a certain set of rules. This movie, even though it's set in the past, is set in the future, because it's a very fictional representation of that. You know what I mean? Like you have people that are in the castle that are fundamentally different as far as the way they look. It's not like the man in the iron mask constantly, that you're seeing in that, or the stereotype of, certain people who live in a castle. This is all fiction. So what I do with that is I say, okay, what is the precedent there might be from like the way a story might have been. And then I throw it out the window and say, okay, that's not important, because the audience that's going to see this is an audience in 2023 or 2000, whatever we're watching it in. And they need to be entertained while showing them the certain dress of a princess and the way a castle might look and these other, but let them have let them have fun in their own way, because it's all fiction, hypothetical theory in the first place. So why pretend to lie as if something's real? So what I do with that is I say, okay, great. What is my audience? What is my weapon? What is my environment? And what is my character? And then I go about it from there to try to orchestrate sort of a modern day sort of West Side Story, in version inside this type of film.
So the brush you have is, I guess, your actress, so to speak. What was your approach with training her and designing action for her character, for her as an actress? What was that whole process?
Pretty much the same that you try to do with anything and everybody when you go to make a movie at the level we try to make it. I go back to the basics. I make a contract with them and say, hey, this is what's expected of you. You're going to have to put in 3 months of work with something it's very foreign to you. And it's going to be painful, but you're going to have to do it. Otherwise, it's not going to be believable that you're a badass princess kicking ass to a bunch of 200-pound men in armor. All right. So it just doesn't work. So what you got to do is you got to blur that reality about making her so good at what she does that it's believable when she engages in the combative dance that you're doing, that, okay, this can happen in the universe that we're creating. So I tried to take them, and especially with her, Joy King, she put in the work constantly. She had injuries and, had surgery on her hand. She couldn't hold the sword. So I said, okay, fine, you're right-handed. So then just do it with your left hand. So she's like, what? And I said, just learn the whole damn thing with your left hand. But that's not, I said, but so then she got so good with the left hand, she didn't want to go back to her right hand. And then I said, okay, now relearn it back to your right hand. And now when we go on the camera, we can do whatever. And so when we got on the set, she could do right hand, she could do left hand, and she can, you know, manipulate the world by virtue of having an accident in practice. And she got better at this. And I just told her, so that's the benefit of what you're doing, is you're putting in the time. The studios, and they weren't all about it at all. And I said, well, listen, I'm sorry, but I'm going to do it whether you like it or not. And you're more than welcome to fire me. I'm happy to go find another job somewhere that they want to do this, but this is how I'm going to build the car. And you're just going to have to trust me. I said, when you hire a production designer, you know, you trust them to bring the design of the, you know, of the sets. When you hire a DP, you trust him to control the light and the camera. So when you hire me, you trust me to manage your properties of these actors, and you develop a bond with them through suffering, through training, which is a martial art mentality, like a kung fu movie. And you make them sort of sweat. And then by the time they get ready to go to camera day, they have gone on a journey where they're just like, they feel like they're the character. They act like they're the character, and they have the confidence because they've done the moves 1,000 times to now execute that for film, so that the audience believes that that's them doing the scene.
It's almost, you're almost doing a method acting course in a sense, but in a physical sense, where you're going through like a mini martial art voyage with your actor.
Yeah, I mean, maybe Eric, I mean, you know, perhaps, you know, but listen, because I'm an ex-athlete, right? I think in terms of only what I saw through, well, I'm an ex-athlete and I'm an ex-martial art, like I trained since I was a kid. And each one of those, you know, by the time I made the US team in Taekwondo, by the time I was 18, you know, when you go through that, all you know how to do is to focus on something like a gymnast going for an Olympic medal to achieve excellence. So what I do is I just say, okay, those methods worked on a sport level. They can now, because we are a sport of, you know, a dance and musical is a sport, you know, in a way. And you have these characters. So you got to make them realize that they're going, this is more important. You can't phone this in. You understand? Like, you just showing up, saying a couple of lines and getting a close up is bullshit. You know, like, no, because they're paying you a lot of money, and you got to become the character if you're really going to want to have a career. Like, you can't just phone in every performance and then pass it off to some stumble, because that's not art. That's not action. So, I mean, you look at a bad double and a bad wig from a wide shot, you're not into the camera. You're not in the scene. That'd be like shooting bullet the whole thing from the outside and never be inside the car with the Foley and the sound mix, or To Live in Down LA with Billy Freakin. You have to be inside the camera capturing what's going on. If you don't do that, you're screwed. You've got no scene. That's why all the Jackie Chan and the Chinese movies and stuff that we talk about are so effective, because they have a muse to be the Fred Astaire, the Gene Kelly, Ginger Rogers, whatever it is, like Michelle Yeoh and this and that, to play these parts to the point where, like, holy smoke, these guys are like doing it. And it becomes like something so enthralled that you want to watch. It's watching someone play an instrument. If you can't watch the actor, so I tell the actors, hey, if you can't be that guy, you're in the wrong business. And some don't like it and some do, and I don't really care, because they're not going to have a career in 2 or 3 years. And that's just me being cynical, but it's also me being realistic, saying, look, if we're going to do something special, then let's take what we do as a craft, and you call yourself an actor and an artist, and I call myself a stunt coordinator and a second unit director, then let's take what we do very serious, so that we're remembered, not forgotten.
It's almost like a Chambara style of philosophy, where you have your actor and you see the actor, and by virtue of being able to watch the actor's face and seeing that they're in it, it just lends credibility, versus doing a very sort of, you know, tricky camera work version where you're hiding doubles and you're using, you know, very compelling filmmaking, but you lose the actor's face. I mean, how do you approach, because you're not just teaching somebody how to move, but you're also teaching a character, right? You're teaching them to be a character. Does that become involved? Do you involve sort of like character training in your training process for actors?
Absolutely. You have to, because otherwise, what's the meaning behind what you're doing? If you don't have a meaning behind it, and then, you know, sometimes, you know, the actors say, well, I determine what that is. And I said, yeah, sure you do. I says, this is going to be self-discovery until you put on the right hat or until you put on the right mustache or the right cane, you know, like being there, or you got to find the character like Charlie Chaplin. And when you know it, you'll look in the mirror and you'll say, okay, that's the character. I says, but until then, you're reading what's on the script. I said, the way you find it is to grind yourself. So if you're doing a John Wick and all of a sudden, you know, you go through 6 months of 3-gun training, you start to understand how to handle a gun blindfolded. You realize, okay, maybe I can be an assassin and a slick killer. All right. If you get in a car and you drive around and you do all this stuff and you say, okay, man, I'm pretty damn good. I said, yeah, so maybe you are that person. So now that you're playing that character, bring something to it, dude. Like, I don't ever get involved when they want to say what they would do, but if they offer something out, I'll expound upon it. Or I'll try to Jedi mind trick them with saying something when it comes to the physicality of what I'm doing that they discover. And they go, that's my character. And I go, exactly. You understand what I mean? But it's a hard process you got to do, because you got to let the ego down, and you got to be willing to do that. So it really depends on the type of actor that you're dealing with, or the type of egocentric, you know, narcissistic sort of person that's playing this character, because some are methods, some are closed off, some are open, some are not. And you got to understand, how do you manipulate that? Because an actor who's closed off, it's hard for me to come in and say, why don't you try this, sir? Why don't you try this, ma'am? Because they'll go, get away. I'm in my character. And I said, okay, cool, fine. I said, you're in your character, but don't you think you might need your sword right now? Because the scene involves a sword. Oh, thank you very much. Sorry. Okay, you were so into your character, you forgot your sword. Okay, here's your sword, buddy. All right, here's what we're doing. and then it goes on to a process where he learns to sort of let go of that. Like, okay, you don't have to be that guy all the time. Let's focus on what illusion we're trying to give to the audience, because that's all you're playing right now. You're playing a character.
What did they, after the shoot is all done and the actor goes back to real life, do they ever follow up with you afterward and say, hey, there are certain things that I learned on the shoot that I've carried forward now?
Every single time. And the ones that didn't have a perspective or humility to understand the journey they went through and the suffering they had to do. Because every time you play a character, you transform yourself, of tapping into something that, you know, was never there in the first place, but you entertained it, and you realize that that's sort of you're dealing with all facets of human nature and psychosis and thinking and understanding. Like, you know, I wasn't, you know, in the war and things like that, but I romanticized about, hey, would I have the courage to do that? I don't know, but you still have to entertain with, like, I can try to become closer to something like that or not, but no one ever knows. Can you really do the things you do until you go through them? And what it does is it really settles a person down and realizing that, okay, this is what I do for a living. And when I'm not doing this for a living in a fictional world, then I go back to what a normal human being lives like, and like, how do I function in that world? And I focus on both, because you need that yin and yang, especially when you're turning the light switch on and off when it comes to performing or doing whatever you're doing, you know. And I think it's very important, and that's part of coaching these guys. I think a lot of people, you know, like I said, I come from a sports background. I approach, you know, when I see these actors as athletes, I approach them as just, you know, I nurture them, you know, like in a way of like, okay, we're gonna win this, we're gonna train for this championship. What do you need from me? Let me be a servant to that. But all I ask of you is that you train your ass off, so that when you get in there, you kick ass. And they're like, oh yeah. And usually after the show, they always call me and say, hey, thank you very much for making me do that. You changed my life. I said, well, good. That was the point.
Not only do you have your lead actress, but you also have a canvas, which is your location, your props. How do you integrate a location into your action design? Are you in The Princess? Are you able to visit and previs on location, or is it sort of guesswork beforehand?
It's guesswork. You're able to visit at certain times and locations, but you've got to do a mocked up version of what you're doing. So, like, let's say in that movie, there was like 20 floors from the top down. Well, we can't build a 24 set. So we had done with the stunt team in Bulgaria is that we built a 3-floor set that we were rehearsing and constantly, and then we would just go through that and then write the story accordingly and then restitch it how we were shooting it and how we wanted to do it. And that really helps us sort of get a grip on the mass diagram of, you know, sculpting something. But again, you're taking the characters into the environment, because on that, you know, she's fighting like bullhorn guys that are 7 foot tall, that are like a matador. That fight was orchestrated around the principle of a matador fight. and as if the bull is coming, and she's, you know, doing this and doing this, and then you go to the next one, and then she's doing something with a lace, tying up a guy, acting really badass with a crossbow, and then she'll go, and then the scene where, you know, after we get done with the opening scenes to set up the character, okay, this girl can kick ass, you know, which is unique in a castle sword and sandal movie at that time, right? It's like, what the hell are you doing? Because you're almost adding sort of contemporary cinematic language, like Asian-esque, you know, a Hong Kong, you know, type stuff, but it's an amalgamation of everything into a perceptive thing that's supposed to be in the 13th century, right? And by virtue of that, it's almost like watching, you know, like A Knight's Tale, you know, where you're listening to We Will Rock You while they're doing jousting. Like, you know, you're watching something that's supposed to be a long time ago, but you're listening to music that is now. And you're like, okay, but it's cool. What's happening here? We will rock you. Boom. And that's kind of the mentality that you do on a canvas like Princess. And that's what we did, is that every environment, we changed the way we did it, and through the weapon or what we had to do, but also that just raising the stakes for her. For instance, in the middle section, when she's going down that, we composed that or wrote that around the old boy mentality, where the old boy was going for a long time and this and that. And by the time they got to the end, it's all, everybody's tired and breathing and da-da-da-da. Well, I said, okay, cool. I'm just going to rip that theme off, but I'm going to do it down in circles and create chaos to the point where I get it to the end where everybody's tired. And then she makes a jump off the edge and goes down 10 floors and crashes and then escapes out of a window. And we do some da-da-da-da, you know, with the scarf, and then she gets away. And then so, you know, that was my big sort of cinema. But in between, I just said, let's make it gritty and raw, like Old Boy in a castle, because you're in a washing machine. You're in an elevator. It's like doing a fight in an elevator. How do you do a fight in an elevator? It's like really hard. You don't have the wide angles. You got to do everything. Everything's here. So, you know, that gives you your inspiration of the type of paint that you're going to do when you're doing something like that. And it works, you know. And then when you get outside of that and she escapes, and you go to a whole nother thing. Now you take her in the water. Now you take her into All Is Lost. And then you get to the big finale, and then it's open. It's all out into like, done, bah, let's do a big epic thing. So those are the sort of paints, that the insular mentality in the beginning to reveal the character, getting to your midpoint to keep the audience going, holy smoke, so by the time you release them into the end, and that's what it is.
It's very different than the film that you did soon after that. It's Creed 3, in that in The Princess, you have a very, you know, a lot of variety with the location. You have an actress who I believe you've never worked with before.
No.
When second unit directing Creed 3, you have an actor whom you've worked with for years. You've done 2 films with them already. And your canvas now is limited to 4 walls.
Correct.
And 4 moves.
Correct.
Just real quickly, how do you shift gears like that?
Well, you've got no choice, because it's right in front of you. So when you're in a square like that and you only have these to tell the story, now you really, really have to focus on composition and the meaning of what you're doing. Because you can't just spray it like you can in a gun scene where you like that, and people just go pop, 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 and you're killing people with, you know, effects and this and that, and you can be completely way off, but you'll be saved by the effect. You'll be saved by the action reaction of what you're doing and this and that. But in boxing, it doesn't lie. It's the most truthful form of action to do, because you've got nowhere to run and nowhere to hide. Okay, you can't just smash a guy's head on the bar, take a beer bottle and hit him in the head, or kick him in the nuts and take an ashtray and smash it on his throat. Can't do that. All right, can't do it. So in the boxing, you're like, okay, I can't do that, but I can hit you here, but that's not interesting. So how do you make that interesting? And that was the big sort of obstacle. And when you do switch gears like that, is that you're really limited. It's like I think a boxing movie is the equivalent of watching Apollo 13 over and over. you got to get that thing home by building an air conditioner out of a toothbrush. Okay, cool. And that's what it's like doing a boxing. And believe it or not, and a lot of people say no, I'm telling you, after being in this business for a minute, doing martial art movies, action movies, the boxing movie is the hardest movie to do in Hollywood. And it's the one that kind of humbled me. And I'm probably one of the most unlikely guys to do a boxing movie, because I'm a martial artist, karate dude, Taekwondo dude. But the story of all martial arts and fighting is the same, no matter what. And when you study that, you realize, okay, the same story with two legs is the same story with two arms or two knives or two swords. And you try to figure out a way you can keep that, keep the integrity of doing a movie like that. Because most boxing films are historical biography sort of type movies. And when they're fiction, like the Rocky movies that started in the 70s, more so, that is a very difficult genre to play in, because Sylvester Stallone introduced it, created it, started it, was the master of it, and took it to a whole nother level. And it was like the most amazing thing. But the one thing that boxing movie had, which is why they're so hard to do, is it had story. Rocky was a love story, and it had the underdog story, and it placated to the psychosis and the mentality of every American at that time, in the 70s, about being the underdog. And it worked really well with creating that sort of story. And when you go into a Creed and you're an extension of that, and you're the seed of that, and then pop, 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 pop. It's it becomes more and more and more difficult each time, because the characters change, the world changes, the audience changes, the themes, the expectations of the audience changes, and it becomes a lot more difficult because sometimes in the future it becomes less sentimental. It becomes more about the bang and the superficial things that we like as a modern day person. Whereas an older person that's more simpler and archaic love the sentimental value of, maybe there's might be a chance. But, in today's audience, it's not so much maybe there's not be a chance, but it's like, how many chances you give me? You understand what I mean? So it's an interesting way to look at it, but I don't, I hope I didn't go take you left or right on that, but
yeah, you have a very kind of personal, it's a very psychological action style this time.
correct. You talk about Creed 3.
Creed 3.
Yeah.
What was the design intent when Michael B. Jordan contacted you? The design intent regarding the action.
Yeah, the design intent was that he was just very similar to the way I was talking. It's like, look, he had already done that in Creed 1 and 2. And I did Creed 1, and we introduced a whole new style in that, with the Warner, and we did that Darren Aronofsky violent ballet sort of Black Swan mentality. And that, kind of started us all as a team. But then after you go through that journey a couple of times, he called me on number 3 and he's like, okay, well, we're doing the same old, but different. But what are we doing differently? And how do we do this different? I says, it's a good question, because, shooting between the ropes and shooting over the shoulder and doing, under crank slow motion shots of blood are overused now. I said, yeah, that's going to be effective. We got to use that 25%. But what do we got to do differently? And what he said to me was, hey, I'm really in the animation. And I was like, okay, animation. Okay, great. Don't watch a lot of it. Watch some of it. Know enough about it to understand it right away what he was trying to go for. But I'm not well versed like he was, or other people. So I did my homework on it, and yeah, it's very interesting. The perspective change the animation does, and I said, okay, cool. I'm going to take that as a theme, and then I'm going to take that theme that you're doing. I'm going to change the drum line mixed with the camera. All right. So in 1, the drum line was a little bang, 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 bang. And this one I had to go down, to down, 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 to top, pop, pop, pop. Right. So you change the drum line, you change the perspective, and then you change the camera, where instead of going editorially, bang, cut, your standard coverage over profile, special, top, right? Which is your sort of standard of like, okay, if you want to have a list of shots, there you go, booby, you got them. Over profile, special, top, hide, whatnot, bring in whatever you got to do, tell the story. Okay, great, 2 perspectives. Now you got to avoid your blight. That's it. But I said, okay, look, we can't do that. We've got to be more smarter and clever with the camera, and we need to stay in the shots a little bit more and drift, come in and out, pushing in and back out to profiles, back to this, and then get dialogue. Because what I wanted to do in this, Eric, was, because I'm an ex-fighter and I fought at a very high level, like in amateur sports, there was a lot of inner dialogue going on when I'm facing the other character. Like I would be talking to that dude and he'd be talking to me, or we looking at each other, or like when we would clinch, we would say shit, or But there was a mind game going on. Like I would play the coaches, I would play the referee, I would play him, and then I would do stuff like this, and then I would like, and it would be this thing until, and like you was scoring him, and he'd be like, "Damn!" and you go, "Boom!" and you'd hit him. So what I'd said was, we got to get into that psychological mentality of a fight instead of who gives a damn about the punches anymore. We know we can hit those. I said, but can we create the audience entertaining inside this fight of a psychological battle between brother and brother? And that's where the magic happened. And that's where the rewrite started to come in of trying to find the language of this thing. And Michael was very cool with it, and gave me a big leash to kind of play in a sandbox. And then, we just kind of went for it. And I said, look, either we're going to crash on our face or we're going to succeed. And I said, I'm going to bet on the optimism.
What animations were you looking at, and what was your general inspiration coming from?
Well, I think it was the Hajime, the boxing. What's the name of that?
Hajime no Joe, or
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Hajime no Joe, and that was it. So they did a lot of shots, and like for instance, like you see, there's a shot that comes into the face, and the fist slides across, and he goes, oh, and he goes, ah, and he goes, boom, and he hits the button, and it goes in on the fist really, and it comes back to the face, and then we started looking at the way that action reaction into like this hard sort of coming in telling the story. Then there's also another one where Hajime came in and they did the Dempsey roll. So I said, okay, cool. Let's take the Dempsey roll inside the Hajime, which is also a real move. That's why it's called the Dempsey roll, and I think they said the Dempsey roll. And I said, okay, cool. Let's take that. So, and then I started going, okay, my antagonist is going to be the Dempsey roll with that, with the camera's going to do that. He's going to do that. And then I said, okay, George Foreman and a lot of guys, they do crab style. So, we just created that sort of mentality where it's like 52 blocks meets George Foreman. Everything comes everything. Like your hands are doing this, blocking punches. Because everything can't just be here and duck and under. Everything has to be here or deflect. And then it became this almost sort of kung fu movie because I have him doing blocks like high blocks. Because everybody comes over the hand right, so bop, he's high blocking, high block, boom. Instead of like, pop, 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 which is a very sort of, everybody stay in the pocket. Let's play the algorithm of boxing. The algorithm of boxing is not done through expression of character and personality. When you see like hyper good boxers like Roy Jones and cats like that, they'll step out of their algorithm of boxing and they'll start to play around with this kind of stuff where they start to mess with you and they start to throw off your pop, pop, and then they change the rhythm into a combination, and then they'll come back to messing with you and all these different things that guy's going like this, and all you're doing is setting yourself up to make him make a mistake. And I thought that was very important in doing a boxing movie, is to approach it from a realistic mentality of the rhythm, but then add my own flavor to it.
Yeah, the camera plays so heavily into that kind of psychology. What was the DP and camera operators sort of involvement in the action design process for Creed 3?
From the very beginning, I don't really do movies anymore as a second director without involving the DP and the camera operator from the very beginning. Unlike the old days, you would just wait for they come on the set and say, "Hey, here's the shot. Can you follow the action?" Right? I went to them from day one and I said, "Hey, this is the vision I want. This is the vision that Michael wants. I need your help from the very beginning. Help me create this." I made them come in for 2 or 3 weeks, to learn the camera movements, to learn the previs, to learn. We storyboarded it together. Me, the camera operator, and the DP storyboarded it together. We had our own list. We made our own shot list together before we walked in there. And I felt that, bringing them together from the very beginning and creating a team of collaborative artists to help Michael's vision was the best winning formula, because no one was expecting any surprise. And by virtue of that, we get to test, improve, and practice what we're trying to do. Is it right? And is it good? The rest of it, like, Kramer, obviously he did the masterful lighting and this and that. But it was me and the camera operator and my team, Eric Brown and this and that just sort of kind of maintained the integrity of what we're doing.
So Michael could already box from Creed 1 and Creed 2. So how did his training continue for this one?
Difficult because, he's being the director at the same time. And so his responsibility became fivefold because he's producing, directing, he's helping out with everything. And we talked about it, and there was no way around it. and we just had to embrace it. And there were a lot of 7-day, work days or work weeks. There were a lot of 8 p.m. workouts after the day. There were, a lot of things like that. And then the rest of it is just trying to keep his mind tuned with, because muscle memory, once you've been through that journey, it's easier to learn. It's harder when you have him marrying him with Jonathan Majors at the time. And Jonathan's new to fight choreography and this and that. You can look as good as you want with all these muscles and this and that. It doesn't make you talented when it comes to fighting or movement, So, that's a big deal. So, both of them are stacked like a bunch of bricks, with their bodies. And then you got to make them look plausible that they can fight, and, Michael's been doing it 10 years. So, of course, it's easy for him to call up that mechanism and go bang, 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 and take the reactions. Whereas Jonathan, we had to train him a little bit. And then, he's a fast learner, and then he picked it up. And, it's the rest. And that's the hardest part is, putting those two together, because, sometimes it can be like oil and water, until you break down the barriers of what you're doing. It's basically a trust thing, because, when you're swinging fists at each other, there's a mechanism when you get two alphas and two sort of bucks, wanting to ram, you got to settle them down and realize, hey, man, it's we making a movie here, so let's make it as good as we can, and let's let the bravado and the machismo thing go down. And then once you do that and they do that, then they start just going, they're just learning choreography, they're learning dance. It's like doing a Bob Fosse boxing movie, with beautiful people.
Brings up an interesting point about real life rivalry, where sometimes when you see fights like Jackie Chan and Benny Urquidez, who supposedly had a real on-set rivalry, and it sort of explodes on camera, and
Correct.
You, as a viewer, you almost get the sense that like there's something going on there behind.
Oh, for sure. It's for sure. There's definitely a little tension going on there. And I think that's important to, you want that tension is, if you can't have that, then yeah, something's going. But I think competition is good. I think just competition is inherently, we're all competing constantly. And I think that it just strives you to sort of one up what you're trying to do, but it also creates, styles make fights, personalities make fights. And if you don't have that, and you need tension to create someone wanting to watch you. If you don't create tension, and if the audience knows they're not tension there, no one gives a damn what you're doing. They can see right through it. It says, okay, I don't really care that, but hey, these guys are about to get in the fight. I want to watch that. There's some tension going on. They're getting in an argument right now. And you go to that argument when somebody else is doing something this way really good, but you're like, no. The tension's where I want to be. Look, they're about to get in a fight. And that's the kind of tension you want to create to an audience when you bring these guys on. And whether it's done, through practice or whether it's done naturally, because a lot of times you'll get guys that sometimes are method and they're in their roles and they don't like to bounce in and out all the time. And I'm like, okay, who am I talking to right now? Am I talking to Damien? Am I talking to you? And I do it all the time. They're like, what are you talking about? Are you mocking me? And I'm like, yeah, I am. So who am I talking to right now? Because I got to get this translated, because you're punching this guy over here. So are you punching Adonis or are you punching Michael? Which one? Okay, cool. You're punching Adonis. Okay, so when we're punching Adonis, I need you to not punch Adonis because it's Michael. And they're like, oh, yeah, okay, cool. You know what I mean? It's like, hey, let me hand that to you real quick, a little bit, and then it's on. So yeah, it's a trip sometimes, but listen, that's how you pull the best out of some of these guys, is because when a good actor gets into character, I like it. Listen, I'm a sucker for a process. However you want to get into what you get into. I mean, Daniel Day-Lewis, lives the character 24/7. God bless you. That's what it's going to take, and that's the journey you want to go on it. I also like the guy that comes in jovial and fun and says, hey, cool, and ready, everyone will go, boom, and he turns into the character, and then he turns it off and on, and he goes, okay, cool, I'm going to go home. You guys have a great day. And that's a professional.
Can you talk more about that skill? Does that just come with experience? Is that a personality?
It just comes with experience or process and how you learn. I mean, listen, there's very few movie stars left. There's just entertainers, and there's influencers, and there's pop culture icons. There's very few, actors that can have a 20-year career that you go, okay, that's a body of work that people need to study. You'll have the flash in the pan sort of, things that go on between. It's like bright stars, they burn out, but they don't have long careers. So, and I think that, being selective about what process you choose, like I said, if you're going to be Daniel Lewis, okay, cool, that comes with the price. Okay, that takes a toll on you. And then there also comes with the business side of like The Rock, or like a Mark Wahlberg. Those guys pump out, 4 or 5 movies a year and, own 16 restaurants and promote products, and they become a brand of selling what they're selling to an audience of, hundreds of millions of people. And there's a fundamental difference. So like, if you're trying to go after the awards and trying to get the accolades of saying I'm doing something different from the craft, okay, cool. As long as you keep the integrity of that. But after that, if you're not, then you need to be over here just making the money, because that's what it is. It's a business, and you're creating an illusion. You're creating a tale and a ride for somebody. It's not about you. Oh, I did that, so the audience has to feel the same. I said, no, the audience doesn't feel the same way you did, because you're the character. They're not. They're living vicariously through you, and they're also living a fantasy of like rhythm of what they expect. And I think that when the actor realizes that, then they can manipulate themselves into, being a better actor as well. So yeah, it's, some are both, look, both are effective in so many different ways. I think you have to have the insight and the intelligence to differ between the two before you make a rational decision, an irrational decision about throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And I think there's just, some guys just do it different, and then they are just different, and then it's like, wow, okay, that's just okay. That's very difficult to emulate, but it's also very difficult to emulate Michael Jordan. Okay, so what do you say? Like, everybody can shoot the basketball, but nobody can emulate that. And Kobe came close and this and that, but they're still only that. So when you find that guy, you let them just kind of do what they want to do, because you might create magic, as long as they snap out of it at the end. Oh, I'm sorry, I was that character for 3 months. Oh my God, who are you? You're the stunt coordinator? Okay, great. Yeah, I'm the guy that flew you across the. I had no idea who you were because I was playing that character. Like, oh, really, you dork? I'm just kidding.
It almost feels like a possession ritual of some kind.
I don't know. Listen, man, it's the ancient craft of acting. It's the business side is what they should be looking at.
So part of the illusion that you're creating is that these guys are actually hitting each other. But sometimes they actually do hit each other. How much emphasis do you put on real contact between the performers?
I don't think you need it unless you're doing a special shot, which is why you undercrank it, and we do it very slow to the face, and it's very controlled and this and that, so it's not that. But I like the body hitting. So what I do during the pre-process is that I condition their bodies to take a lot of punishment so they can dig in the body, because they don't have to pull it. Because when you pull a punch, it becomes very weak. And I say, hey, dude, the camera's looking at you pulling that punch. I say, I need you to smack him. So bah! Because you bounce off of that, you come into that, and you come to a fake hit to the face. I go, give me 2 reels to the stomach and give me 1 fake to the face. And then it looks like back, boom. And it looks like you exploded, and yeah, so I try to condition their body, but when you're going into the face, I don't warrant any touching the face unless you do an undercrank, or a high speed sort of like, shooting of your, thing. Then yeah, because then you can manipulate it in post, whatever, speed you want it. If it's unbelievable at 48, and bring it to 36, it's unbelievable at 60, like whatever. Most people shoot things in 120 now, a lot, almost everything. I mean, you don't necessarily need it. There were times I was like, why are we shooting this at 120? So we're never getting over 38, or we're never getting over 36, or we're never, but they do it because they want to stay at playback a little bit longer than normal, so that they collect overtime. So when you're looking at a playback at 120, they get overtime. So all right, we're closing on the set, but like, wait a minute, we're looking at this cool shot that's going to be edited in 36, 48, but we're shooting nice at 120. And then you're like, and the lights go down. That was a joke for all you filmmakers out there.
I never thought of that. It's a great idea. I'm going to use that.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's there's some really interesting fight design choices in the second fight, where you see a lot of dirty fighting, and sort of sets up the Anderson character. Um, what was the approach to the dirty fighting? Was that in the script already? Was this stuff that you figured out in the previous process?
No, there were some basic rudimentary things in the original script. Obviously writers, when they write stuff, they don't, it evolves over and over once you hire a guy like me that comes in and, gives it meaning and language, right? But no, all that stuff is original. That stuff of hitting the arm came from Roy Jones and it came from Canelo. There's a lot of videos like there where they, they would punch the arm over and over and over, and the guy couldn't lift his arm up. It was like swollen up red. And then of course they go in and they finish the deal. And hitting the bicep, and then when you dirty fight, you're hitting like stuff on the legs. You're hitting at awkward angles. Even when you clinch, you're doing rubbing your head, and you're doing like some dirty boxing. They call it dirty boxing, and we wanted to sort of like play with that because this guy had been in jail for 18 years. The character Damien, and I said, okay, 52 blocks, dirty boxing. He was once a slick Mercedes, but now he's a sort of a tank of a Mercedes. Over the skin of the engine of a Mercedes, right? So by doing that, it took away the slickness and it made the roughness, and then that's where we based the world of the character, and that also defined how we did our rhythm, and how we do stuff, because there are many styles of fighting. There's American style, Philly style, Mexican style, European style, this style, that style, and then there's just guys that are brawlers, and there's guys that are just that have the engine. So and you respect them all differently, the same way you respected Wayne Gretzky differently. No one ever checked him into the boards because they said, okay, he's royalty, right? You don't check Wayne Gretzky. He's the all-time leader in the NHL. You don't touch him. So nobody, like, if you even try to throw a fist at Wayne Gretzky, his teammates would be like kick, 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 smashing people. They protected that specialness in that, and I think that you have to look at things like that.
There's some real heart in this too, with the training scene with the little girl.
Yep.
Kind of touched on the heart of the film. Were you involved in the training scene design as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, just a little bit. Listen, obviously, she's hearing impaired, and the whole deal. So it's like we dealt with that, and we're dealing with sign language, and through the whole process. But she learned very rudimentary, basic things because she was never intended to be anything good. It was just intended to be sort of. There was an Easter egg plant of like, perhaps she might carry this on with him, and the father Adonis will. There might be a potential way to, if they wanted to pass it on, but either way, he's instilling his daughter with the same tenacity. Because if you remember in the movie, there's a scene where she got in a fight in school. The teachers, called the parents, and hey, your daughter's in, and the father's all proud, but the mother's all pissed off. The father's like, yeah, all right, cool, you did the right thing. And she's like, you can't ever do that. It's like, what are you talking about? Like, so it's pretty funny, you do it, but him as a boxing father, a contemporary, sort of like passing that down as like, the intention of it. But yeah, I mean, listen, Michael allowed me to be a part of like, creating the universe of what he was doing for the action, which is some of it had to do with his character. But, when it comes to what he's doing, he pretty much knows the character 100%. And there's just me giving out ideas for him to wear a different shirt sometimes, or like, hey, what do you think about doing this? And they're like, cool. But I'm not saying, hey, your character would do this. I'm just saying maybe your character might wear this shirt today because it's Saturday night and we need to do this. And he's like, okay, yeah, I get what you're going with this. And also the way you act on this. So like sometimes if he starts out playing something more, I might whisper in his ear away from everybody. And I say, hey, dude, how's it on the streets? You less is more, right? Don't show your cards right now. And he's like, got you. And then he'll do the next take and he won't say anything, but then he comes across 10 times more menacing in what he's doing as opposed to trying to force something. And you do the same thing when it comes to action, and you do the same thing, but I never get involved in the character. But I'm always a confidant of, I'm creating the physical side of that character, and I might say to him, hey man, this physical side might wear his hat this way now. You understand what I mean? And he's like, okay, cool. I didn't look at it like that. So yeah, you try to find things like that. And then going back to the girls, like I had very minimal with how he related to her as a storyteller, but like when it came to the punching, it was just very rudimentary and basic for her. Nothing to try to build too far on with her. It was hard enough already focusing on a real boxer with Jose Benavidez, and you know, an actor like Jonathan and, you know, Michael, and, you know, you've got three stubborn actors that, you know, are very, very good in their own rights at everything they do, but then trying to make them do something together. And that seems to be the mystery question that people pay money for guys like myself to figure out. And I have no idea what that position is. It might be a stunt coordinator, second, I have no idea, but it's crazy.
Talk about that final showdown with the in the finale between Adonis and the villain. You know,
Well, that's an epic one, man. That fight was composed, the fight that you saw on screen was composed differently than the edit from the story, but the structural model we used was rounds 1 and 2, which is the Rocky model. You know, 3, 5, 7, or 9, whatever you want to do, the middle section, which became the void, and then 11 and 12, your championship rounds to tell the story. So you arc it in a 3-act sort of play of 1 and 2, the middle rounds, and then the 11 and 12, and then you can jump lines in that, whether you go from 1 to this to that. But that was the model. And listen, it was a very difficult thing of, like I said, of melding these boxes with their rhythms to orchestrate something that was entertaining, that was not the same old, same old. So we had to come up with themes of punching through things. I kept the camera moving again, like, and very much, and I kept them talking to each other. If you look at the movie, they're talking to each other. You're getting soft, you're getting, oh, you weak, and they're like, oh, you got, that's all you got. Like, that's all I got. Like, the same thing that Rocky did with Rocky 4. You ain't so bad, or like Rocky 2, you ain't so bad, dun, the music changes, blah, blah, blah. You're getting in the heads of these people. But that was a really difficult fight to do. Just to bring all of the whole vision of what Michael wanted to do with the whole anime, because we bookended that from the first fight to the end fight. We laid the Easter egg of the bolt camera in the first fight, and the bolt camera is this camera that goes here, 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 and it can move around. And we said, okay, let's plant the seed of this, and then in that we planted Adonis' vision, where the eye sees something, and we go, and then we look at this, and then said, okay, let's do that in the first fight, and then when it comes to the end fight, it's already, the audience is aware of it, and that's what we did. So we created Adonis' vision. We created a concept of moving the camera. And then when he goes from the first round, we started out slow. Like, if you watch that first round, the audience is booing him. And Mike and I created this whole thing where he's doing this. And then Michael says, no. He goes, you ever seen these fights where fighters start out and the audience boos them because they're slow? And I said, yeah. He goes, cool. And I said, beautiful. I said, well, you haven't been in the ring in 3 years, right? Great. So you're rusty. So we started out, you're a little bit rusty because you don't want to engage with the fight in the beginning. So the audience is booing you. And then when you do, you get handed to you, and then now you're in a fight. By the end of round 1, you realize you're in a fight, and then he walks back to his chair, and his coach says, okay, thanks for joining the party. And he's like, okay, I've been away for a minute. And that's what we went off of. We said the round 1 is he's rusty, hadn't been in the ring 3 years, the crowd boozing him, which is completely different than you normally. The way it was written in the script, it was written that they come out and they were fighting like this, and I was like, no, that's boring. We're gonna get boring after 20 seconds. But when you do that, so Michael, led that, agreed with that, and then we created that with round 2, and then it led us into the void. Then we experienced their past from their childhoods. We did light changes and different things and expressions of silence and screaming and anger, and that was sort of the therapy session in the boxing match. And then 11 and 12 became the resolution, coming to terms with their eventual sort of conflict that was brewing for all this time. And the round 12 was the forgiveness, where they punched each other, abused each other, loved each other, and then one guy had to win. And Damien says, I knew it was you, and I knew you could do it. So it was really cool because he had this older brother kind of like pushing him, and that's how we formulated all the action around the story of that and created the bang around all of that.
How long did it take to shoot that whole end fight sequence?
I think we had a total of 4 to 5 days, because there were a lot of other things like the walk-ins, all the prep and the aftermath and stuff like that were not a part of the boxing. But that, of course, we had to have a day or two to, and plus you're shooting out of the ring. So you have all the actors there that you're shooting the principals out of the ring, you're shooting the ring corners, you're shooting all the blood, the makeup, this and that. So, but I think for the fights, for that ending fight, it was about 4 or 5 days. And it was much needed because we could have used another 2 days to make it even better. But you're always dealt with what you get, and you just make it work. So,
What was the biggest challenge this time with the action?
the biggest challenge is managing a new frontier of new ideas, of trying to do the same old but different. And you know, it becomes repetitive, you know, as a choreographer, because, you know, same as any stars we look up to, you know, okay, well, Donnie Yen's fighting the same in these 3 movies, and he's fighting different in this movie, and then he goes and does a Sakura, you know, or he'll do this. They're like, what? How do you, as a performer, you know, you play a cowboy one time, you play a race car driver. Like, what do you do as a choreographer? You know, are you constantly in the same box of just doing the same weapons and doing the same thing, and you can make that look cool? And you could do Brad Allen, you know, like he does in those Kingsmith movies, where he's taking these beautiful sort of expressions and things like the church fight or the, you know, the Rasputin fight, and adding his vibe to it. Or do you go to a bar and do some Rock and Jason Statham stuff of nut kicks and, you know, throat chops with beer bottles? You know, so that's the hard thing, is like, okay, figuring out how do you entertain someone in this box that we started out talking about, you know, and I think that that's it's always the hardest challenge, but, you know, you have to take it serious. And that's what keeps me up at night, and that's what keeps me employed, is that you care about what you're doing. Because the minute you don't, people are going to see right through you and walk all over you.
What have you taken from doing, we've done 5 boxing movies now?
Yeah.
What have you taken from doing boxing movie action, and how have you applied that to doing other kinds of action?
The focus and the minimalism of it. You know, I've always used a minimalistic sort of approach in action anyway, you know, like a la TKD Kitano, or a la what you and I did in Blindsided. I think our whole conversation was, you know, in making that film, was just constantly minimalism, and less is more. And we don't need to do this. We don't need to hurt someone. We don't need to kill anybody. We don't need to just pull the blade out and stop. Just stop before the ear. Just do this. Just minimalism of everything that's happening in the world. So I think that, you know, when I do a boxing movie, it really it ties my hands. It makes me have to really focus on something that carries a lot of weight because listen, the boxing movie has a lot of fan base and a lot of historians watching you. You can't really mess around. That's why, like I said, most boxing movies are done by real life figures, because they're bigger than life characters. The fictional boxing movie is where you have a little bit of a different playing field, but I still wanted to keep the integrity of rhythm and realism, which is why I, you know, in Creed 3, I wanted it to be about 2 guys fighting, because I've experienced that, and I wanted to put that into the boxing thing. So if I take that the same way when I go into another environment, because, you know, the next movie I do is going to be a sword movie with wire work. Okay, great. Now I can do whatever. Okay, cool. Now I get to do a different edit, and I get to just completely have different instruments with the camera, you know, and I'm like, okay, cool. So it just shows you that if you don't have that and they do put you in a box, you can make something interesting. So that's what I would tell a young student out there that, you know, probably needs to have a few more fights under his belt, even though he's a wizard and he's very good. That, yeah, you're good, but you're not going to be good until you can do things with less is more and still achieve the same result and get home just like Apollo 13.
It's beautiful. It's a great message. I think that's a fantastic way to tie it up, personally.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Clayton, thanks so much for you know, talking. Thank you for all of your advice over the years, for your working relationship and your friendship. It means a ton. So
hey, listen, it means a ton to me, to you, Eric, and I'm very happy that you're doing this. You know, the work you're doing, documenting all this stuff, is needed, and you're probably one of the men that have the patience and the intellectual knowledge to know how to do it, and also care for it. And I think that there's a lot of guys that are doing some of this stuff, but you actually care about documenting this stuff for generations and to come. And I appreciate it. So anything you need, you and I are always going to work together. We're always going to do stuff. We're brothers, and just keep doing what you're doing, man. And it's really, really nice to see you bringing all these great artists, talking about them, and you're pulling us to bring in the way we really are giving the truth to people, as opposed to a glossy, conversation. And I'm happy to do that because I want people to know what it's like. And I appreciate you for doing that.
Awesome. Happy to do it. This is something I look forward to all the time. And it's been a huge learning experience for me too. I mean, I think I'm probably a better action designer just after talking to people, and at least I think I am. I haven't tried it. Maybe I'm worse. I don't know. Maybe I won't know what to do now. Maybe I have too many ideas. All right, Clayton.
Well, thanks, Eric. I appreciate it, brother.
Yeah.
All right,
This has been an interview with Clayton Barber. Action Talks is available on YouTube, iTunes, and Spotify. Join my Telegram at t.me/Eric Jacobus. You can check out my studio at superalloyinteractive.com. My website and blog is at ericjacobus.com, and be sure to subscribe. Thank you.